Some encounters stay with you forever. Tonight's video features two true horror stories that will make you think twice before being alone at night. Let's begin. At the time, I was 17 years old and traveling through North Carolina with my dad, who works as a long-haul truck driver. I had joined him on the road because I was thinking about getting my CDL someday, and I wanted to experience what life as a trucker was really like. We're from Georgia, so the trip wasn't too long. After making the delivery schedule for the following morning, we pulled into a busy highway rest area sometime after midnight. The truck parking lot was packed, but almost every driver had already gone to sleep. My dad climbed into the sleeper cab within minutes, while I stayed awake scrolling through my phone. Around 2 in the morning, I decided to use the restroom. Since I figured nobody would be inside that late, I grabbed my electric razor as well. I wanted to clean up my mustache before going to sleep. The restroom was divided into 2 identical sections connected by the same entrance. When I walked into the first side, I noticed a very tall man standing near one of the urinals. He had to be around 6'4". He didn't say anything. I figured he was just another truck driver. I walked into a stall, finished using the restroom, washed my hands, and was about to leave. That's when I realized the man hadn't moved. He was still standing there. Right as I headed toward the exit, he slowly unzipped his pants, as if he had only just decided to use the urinal. Something about the timing felt strange, but I ignored it. Instead of leaving completely, I quietly walked into the second restroom section to trim my mustache. I stood in front of the mirror and switched on my razor. Less than 10 seconds later, the same man walked in. My stomach immediately tightened. There was absolutely no reason for him to leave the first side and enter the second one unless he was following me. He slowly walked toward me. Then, the second he noticed the razor in my hand, he froze. It was almost like I'd ruined whatever plan he had in mind. Trying not to panic, I kept trimming my mustache while watching him through the mirror. He walked over to another urinal and pretended to unzip his pants, but instead of looking forward, he kept staring directly at me. Our eyes met in the mirror. He gave me a small nod. I nodded back, pretending everything was normal because I didn't want him to realize I knew something was wrong. A few moments later, he walked into an empty bathroom stall. Curious, I glanced over. He wasn't using the toilet. He wasn't moving at all. He was simply standing perfectly still in the corner of the stall, staring directly at me with wide, unblinking eyes. Every instinct in my body told me to leave immediately. I forced myself to stay calm and finished trimming my mustache as quickly as I could without cutting myself. A few seconds later, he stepped back out of the stall and once again pretended to use the urinal. The second I finished, I grabbed my razor and headed toward the exit. As I walked past him, I kept the razor firmly in my hand just in case I needed to defend myself. He was much taller than me, looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, and could easily have overpowered me. Thankfully, he never followed me outside. The moment I stepped out of the restroom, I noticed security cameras mounted above the entrance, and for the first time in several minutes, I felt slightly safer. I hurried back toward my dad's truck, where he was still asleep. After calming down, I texted one of my friends and explained everything that had happened. About 20 minutes later, he suggested that I go back to the restroom while staying on FaceTime with him. Looking back, it probably wasn't my smartest decision, but I went anyway. By the time I returned, the mysterious man was gone. I showed my friend where everything had happened before leaving again a few minutes later. As I walked back toward the truck, something else caught my attention. Behind the rest area was a separate parking lot for passenger vehicles. One red car sat alone with its headlights on. The second I turned to look at it, the headlights suddenly switched off. I couldn't see who was inside. Maybe someone had just parked. Maybe they were leaving. Or maybe it was the same man from the restroom. I'll never know. Nothing else happened that night, and I never told my dad about the incident because I knew he'd never let me wander off alone again. To this day, I still wonder what that man intended to do. And sometimes I ask myself one question: what would have happened if I hadn't been holding that razor? The next story comes from a woman who has spent her entire life living in New York City. Using the subway late at night had become routine for her, until one ordinary commute turned into something she'll never forget. The first time something happened, she had just stepped onto a subway train moments before the doors closed. She stayed near the doors with her headphones in, barely paying attention to the people around her. A few seconds later, she noticed a homeless-looking man staring directly at her while saying something. At first, she ignored him, assuming he was talking to himself, but he kept staring. Eventually, she removed one earbud and asked what he'd said. The man's expression instantly changed. He began shouting insults at her loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Her heart immediately started racing. She looked around the train, hoping someone would acknowledge what was happening, or at least make eye contact with her. Nobody did. Everyone simply looked away. Feeling trapped, she decided not to wait for her stop. As soon as the train reached the next station, she quickly stepped off and rushed into the next subway car before the doors closed again. For the next several stops, she kept glancing through the windows, terrified the man had followed her. Finally, 2 stations later, she watched him step off the train. Only then did she realize she'd been holding her breath the entire time. She tried convincing herself it was just another strange experience on the New York subway. A few years later, while attending graduate school, her evening classes usually ended around 8:30 p.m. By the time she finished taking the train, catching the bus, and starting the walk home, it was normally after 10 o'clock at night. That evening, she was listening to horror stories through her headphones while walking home. Ironically, the story she was listening to was about a woman being followed. Because of that, she found herself paying more attention to everything around her. The final part of her route required her to walk past a few stores before turning onto a quiet residential street with very little lighting. As she walked past a Popeyes restaurant, she briefly thought about buying some mac and cheese. She had already walked past it before deciding to turn around. The moment she changed direction, she noticed a man she'd seen earlier on the bus. The second he realized she'd turned around, he stopped walking completely. He simply stood there, staring at her with wide eyes. Trying not to overreact, she went inside Popeyes anyway. A minute later, she walked back outside after finding almost no food left. She continued toward home. Halfway down the block, her heart dropped. The same man was now standing at the entrance of the dark street she needed to walk down. He wasn't moving. He looked like he was waiting. Without hesitating, she called her brother. Thankfully, he answered immediately. The second she told him where she was, he said he was already on his way. Knowing help was coming, she cautiously walked down the street anyway. Moments later, she heard footsteps behind her. The man had started following her. He matched her pace without saying anything. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "I love you." After that, he continued mumbling words she couldn't understand. She immediately decided it was safer to stay somewhere with people nearby. She turned around and walked back toward the brightly lit stores, stopping outside a nearby liquor store. Since she lived in the neighborhood, she hoped she'd recognize someone standing outside. That night, she didn't know a single person. A few moments later, the man approached her. He repeatedly asked if she needed help. Each time she loudly answered, "No." Instead of leaving, he kept stepping closer. Then she noticed something that made her even more uncomfortable. He was wearing latex gloves. It wasn't cold outside, and this was long after masks had become uncommon. The gloves felt completely out of place. He kept insisting she needed to go home, almost as if he wanted her to walk back down that dark street with him nearby. Then, without warning, he walked inside the liquor store. The second he disappeared through the door, she spotted her brother walking toward her from the other end of the street. She hurried over to him without looking back. The entire encounter had lasted only a few minutes, yet it felt much longer. Even today, she still thinks about both nights and wonders what could have happened if she hadn't trusted her instincts. Sometimes, listening to that quiet voice telling you something isn't right can save your life. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these true horror stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, and good night.